Yeah, I'm changing out the U-joints on this car. I'm actually doing two, and then I'll have to get four more because there's six on a Jeep. There's two that come from the transmission to the transfer case, and there's two from the transfer case back to the rear wheel, the differential, and then there's two more, another pair that go from the the differential in the front back to the transfer case. So one thing you do though is you want to make sure when you're loosening these up, make a little, take your U-joints off, put the emergency brake on, and that'll keep your drive shaft from spinning, at least on this one, because, well, it might not work on your Samurai though, because I have the emergency brake up here. See that? The actual drum locks the transfer case. So, that's one good feature of this. Actually, if you have an open end differential, you'd have to put it in, you'd have to make sure the wheels are basically on the ground in the back, and you'd have to jack up the front before you lock it up, that way. But here I have the 12 millimeter bolts on here. There's four of them, and it makes it a little easier to loosen things up. This one is there. See, it's loose. There's just a straight through bolt like this. There's a washer on one side and a washer on the other side. It's pretty fucking simple, actually, to tell you the truth. But these were rusted up pretty good, and I let them sit for a few days, and I doused them down with penetrating oil first because they were rusty. So I'll get these off. There's four bolts off, then I should be able to slide the drive shaft out and get the U-bolts out. And basically, you got to take the clips out and pound them out. I'll show you how to do that. I don't have my big anvil anymore. I used to love that thing, but I got some other stuff I can use that'll work. I also have the U-joints that have the grease fitting in them. These are the original U-joints, and I just want to say something. I'm not 110% sure it's the U-joints that are bad, but I noticed when I was driving backwards, I heard a squeaking noise coming out from this area right here, and I don't think it's a transmission because it was rebuilt by Amoco. Even though it was a while ago, I don't think that's the problem. These are original U-joints. The squeak went away. Then at low speed, this thing was vibrating like this, and I'm assuming it's the U-joint. In other words, they're stiff. There's no play in them. I can rock them back and forth. There's no play in them or nothing like that. But I think since the original U-joints and you can't grease them, they're dry and they're stiff, so it's causing this to vibrate like this when it's at low speed. So I'm going to change them out. And it should be just those two, but I'll change out all six eventually. But that should fix the immediate problem just by doing those two right now. Well, this is the little drive shaft that goes from the transmission to the transfer case in the Suzuki. And the longer drive shaft goes to the back, the back wheels and the front wheels. But the I guess this U-joint, you can see this turns. See, when I was in the car and I was trying to shake this, there didn't seem nothing loose. This turns this way, but this way, trying to go up and down, the other joint, it's like rock solid. This way it works, so that's definitely the problem. And I use these snap ring pliers like this to take out the snap rings. The way these work, these are cheap ones, but they work. And you basically can install them to, you just unscrew this, and you can make it so they squeeze together, or they for removal. In other words, if you squeeze this on here, you put this and screw this in this hole, they squeeze together. If you screw this in the other hole, when you squeeze the handle, they open up, the ends open up. So it depends if it's going on the inside or the outside. Now, these are the original U-joints from 1985, and actually it's going to really be cheap. It probably only needs one U-joint, this one here, but I'll change all six of them. But the replacements, they have a grease fitting in them, and I got these from AutoZone. These were pretty cheap, so I forgot what the hell they were. They You know, sometimes some places will charge you $30 for the same thing, and these are like under 10. So I don't know what the deal is. And these are Duralast. Okay, so they put the grease fitting on the end cap here. Sometimes they put them in here in the center, like there. But you know, this doesn't affect anything. Actually, if you wanted to, you know, say it was an emergency, you can actually drill a hole here and put a grease fitting in it and probably get some grease in there and make the joint work, like spray some lube in there or something. Say it was an emergency and you just couldn't get a U-joint, you know, whatever the hell you were, and it was like really dry. You can do that, but always get the ones with the grease fittings on it. Just make sure you don't over grease them and blow these seals out, but they just need enough to where you see the seals bulge up. And so they'll be installed right now after I take out all these snap rings. And I marked the drive shaft. I don't need to do that, but I do that. It's going to go back in the same spot, so make sure. And I'll do one at a time. I'll take one out, put it in, and do the other one. That's the way I do things. Now I marked the drive shaft because I'm going to put these U-joints in, you know, to whatever everything's going back the same way it was. This was marked over here. You know, this might not make a difference where it's bolted in. I doubt that, but everything I put back exactly the same. Same steel, same deal with, like, you know, if you take out push rods and stuff like that, I put them back the same way. Everything, you know, unrelated stuff, I always put it back in the same way because there could be a slight difference. So what I'm using here, I'm going to use an impact socket, and this is going to get pushed up through the other side into the impact socket, and I'm going to use this, hammer it on the other side with the BFH. And I have a big piece of steel to use this, rest this up against, and I'll show you what I'm doing. So it should work fine. So I got a nice piece of steel here. Actually, I wound up using a slightly bigger socket. The impact sockets weren't big enough, but this was big enough right here. And it's pounding out. It's going in there. I'm using a big hammer. So you can see it's moving out. So I'll knock that through, and once they're knocked out, we'll be installing the other ones. I'll show you how to install them. And after you knock these through most of the way, you can see, like, I have it through, you know, it's through there. You take the pliers here, vice grips, and you pull them off. You know, I got to use some penetrating oil to get them off, but basically then the whole thing just comes out, and that's it. So anyway, next to be to press them back on, and you know, that's a trick because you got to make sure you don't the little needle bearings that are inside the cups, you got to make sure you don't make any of them go sideways. There's all these little needle bearings in there, and I'll show you how to do that. I use a big C clamp or vice. Actually, I don't have a vice anymore. I'll use this big C clamp instead. Now what I do is I make sure this part here, this part is pushed all the way into the bearings when this cap is out, and as I squeeze it in, I push in this one side. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold this piece firmly up into here, and I'm going to tap this through this way so it sticks out a little bit that way. This way I could start the next cap, because in other words, I don't want this surface here to push out one of those needle bearings. I want to make sure those needle bearings are fully seated. So this piece is going to stick out a little bit this way. I'm going to hold this into here, make sure it's fully seated so the needle bearings don't fall out and get out of position or something. I mean, they shouldn't, as long as you have it in this, you know, the race that's inside on the needle bearings part way, it's not going to come out. And then have this piece stick out a little bit. This way I could start the end cap, and then I could press it on. So now you notice how I pushed through the end cap here. Like, I used a socket to tap it through, and I made sure this was seated in here so the needle bearings don't come out. So now on the top here, I could start this piece by you know, pushing it on, because you don't want any of these needle bearings to pop out. You know, you want to make sure they're on there fully seated. So That's the deal. And once they get started, you're okay. Okay, so I squeezed in that bearing, and everything should be lined up nice and good. Now, if you'll know if it doesn't work right is if well, for instance, if you can't fully seat the cap in all the way, that means one of those needle bearings is going horizontal in the bottom there someplace. You'll know there's a problem. Okay, and you could tap these in with a hammer if you're very careful. I don't recommend it. I'd rather squeeze them in because you can knock one of those needle bearings out. And if you knock one of the needle bearings out, well, you're not going to get the cap in all the way. And if you do force it in somehow, you're going to have a problem eventually, so it'll fall apart. Now, these particular U-joints come with clips for the inside and the outside, but Suzuki uses them for the outside. So you have to install them with the snap ring pliers and make sure they go in a groove. So like when you push them in, you might have to go around here and make sure they're fully seated in a groove so they don't pop out. Now on the other side, I'm going to have to tap this in just a little bit, and I'll get the other side, the other clip in. But you notice these have clips for on the inside too, but these are not. I guess you could put them in there too. You can have double clips, but that's not how it's designed. It's actually for the outside. Now, these aren't for the inside at all, so you'd only use the outside ones. But that's probably why they're cheaper, because they're probably for a few different cars, so they're able to make them that way. But they're to the right specifications, and they have a grease fitting on them. They'll work fine. Okay, so again, this is the final side, and you can see I'm using a little, I don't know if it's probably going in nice and easy. Yeah, it is, see? There she goes. Use a little grease on this stuff too, because now I'm using this, just want to make sure I'll get the one C clip in. I can see if I can get them both even. I'll put the two clips in there and that'll be it. Alright. Well, actually, that took care of the problem, because actually the problem was this U-joint here, and this U-joint is absolutely fine. There's no play in it, but since it's from 1985, I'm going to put a new one in it. Same deal, but I'm just going to end the video here, because what I'm going to do after I put this one in is I'm going to clean this off chemically, prime it, and paint it so there won't be any rust on it, and add a little more grease to that fitting. And you add just enough grease. You don't put too much grease in there, because you can kind of screw up these seals a little bit. Just put like a squirt or two of grease in there. But I'm going to make sure this is all painted up, so it'll keep rust out of here, out of the cups and stuff like that too. And I don't know, just to get it a little more perfect. But anyway, that's it. And surprisingly, I probably only had one U-joint bad out of 6 out of all, because everything seems tight. And that was my vibration right over here. It was, it was working this way, but the opposite way, it was stiff, and that was causing some low-speed vibration. Too bad they don't use grease right from the beginning on these U-joints. And actually, if I was in a pinch or something like that, you could see what the hell was the problem was. It was this one here. You could see which one it was stuck right there. So actually what you can do is, if you're careful, you can add the fitting on these too. You can actually add the fitting. If you drill into these caps, one of the caps, and you make sure you take out the shavings with a Q-tip, and you go ahead and install a grease fitting and tap and die with a tap and die set, you can actually install them on the existing one. So like, say for instance you had a car and you just couldn't find parts for it. I was lucky that this takes the same U-joint. It's not complicated on this. I have a Jimny 1300, actually a Samurai. The same U-joints fit on this particular 85. But say you had something that was rare as dodo eggs, you could probably just take this apart, clean it up, install a grease fitting, and put it back together, as long as it wasn't like worn out, and that would take care of the problem. You could do stuff like that. If you got something where some parts are rare as dodo eggs, you could do that.